Hey guys, this is Adam Menner from the VH Performance Podcast, powered by the Business of Strength. Today we have an awesome guest. His name is Jeremiah Flood, Flood Sports Performance, out in California on the West Coast. Jeremiah has an awesome approach to training and rehabilitation where he kind of integrates neurodynamics with current modern strength and conditioning and skill acquisition. So today we just kind of map out everything from his thought process, designing training sessions, his assessment processes, and also just rehabilitation. We focus primarily on the ACL, but he goes into much greater detail on some other injuries as well. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. If you guys have any questions about how we can get started or questions regarding the information that we put out, you can visit vheducation.com. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you inside. Hey guys, what's going on? Adam Menner here from Varsity House Performance Podcast. Today we have an awesome guest, a buddy of mine that we've just met online, obviously, over the ethosphere. And this is Jeremiah Flood from Flood Sports Performance. And thanks for coming on the pod. We have some cool stuff that I know that we're going to talk about. So,
yeah, it's going to be a good time. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
For sure. I mean, you're out on the West Coast. You know, we talked about that before. So, you know, as we were saying off air, and you're kind of almost in a physical space though, but just kind of talk about your background and how you got into where you are now.
Yeah, for sure. So I went to St. Thomas Aquinas High School. I'm actually from the East Coast in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Got a lot of injuries there. So that kind of tons. So that kind of that was kind of foreshadowing to understand what I'd go to study in college, which was strength and conditioning, and a lot of how to, I guess, simple, how to not get injured.
Right.
So I was a walk-on at FIU football, ended up earning a scholarship. After that, I started playing rugby, and I started taking rugby kind of seriously at that point. So age 22, tried to make the Olympic team, tried to go pro. So I wasn't training at the time, but I would use what I learned in school and on my own self. So self-experiment. Once I figured out it wasn't going to happen, I ended up working with these kids over here in Pasadena, California. And I've been there with them for now 5 years. And so it's been a fun 5 years of using what I self-experimented on myself, and then from what their sports and where they're trying to achieve, just blend it together.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a classic. I don't think I've ever met somebody who's in the industry who doesn't have, like, I played sports, I got hurt, you know,
and then it's done.
And then there is. But it's true though, you know, they talk about, I think it's really important that a great coach can make somebody else better than themselves, because
right.
you remove that subjectivity out of your coaching, where it's like, that's why some of the highest level athletes don't make great coaches, because they don't experience the same, you know, inhibitions that, you know, younger athletes who don't get to that level usually do.
Yeah, totally. And you definitely use your own personal setbacks as launch pads for them, for the people you're coaching.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, just calling a spade, you know, we both been, you know, very lucky to work with high level athletes. And it's like 99% of the people that you're going to work with are not going to be those individuals. Mm-hmm. And so when you use yourself, who we are not those individuals, we know and we can empathize a lot with some of those people that we work with. And like you said, you know, we'll dive a little bit. I think that allows you to formulate and actually coach it because you had to live it.
Exactly.
For sure. You know, and so one of the things that we were talking about before is just your kind of unique approach into training, if you will, you know, and just lead us through that a little bit, because I've been looking at a lot of the things, and I've been working with athletes recently who have had ACL injuries. And so what are some of the realizations that you've come to working with your athletes in regards to not only ACL rehabilitation, but kind of what we talked about off air?
Yeah, that's a lot. So we'll go with the healthy athletes first.
Yeah.
So this all goes back to playing rugby, where I knew I was more physical than the other players just because of D1 football, but I couldn't process the game. Right. So there was something missing. I didn't understand the tactics. I couldn't read holes. I couldn't see what needed to be seen. So that just goes into decision making. And then I read a really good book called The Playmaker's Advantage. And that was a huge catalyst into where I am now, as far as changing the methodology of what we did, instead of just like focusing on speed performance. We started like bringing things down and making sure kids can understand scenarios and environments. that they're in
For
and make
sure.
the right decision based on that. And then obviously add the speed, add the technique. But we went through a decision-based model first, and then we add the performance model after that.
Yeah, I say this all the time, especially working with like basketball players is just, who we work with a decent amount, but we work with all athletes, of course. And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting because you hear the term the game slows down a lot,
Right.
right? But it's like when you actually define what that means, it's also just the neuroplasticity in youth individuals being exposed to those frequent high, decision-making plays that you're talking about. For instance,
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I played basketball, it was like, I was in sixth grade playing with eighth graders. So the game was a lot faster. So your ability to make decisions was quicker. And then when you got
Right.
to sixth graders, you're like, wow, these guys are not as
It's
fast as
really
me.
slow.
So the pace of play slows down. Do
Mm-hmm.
you feel like that plays a role, like from the sports side of things too? Like maybe exposing your kids to faster paced scenarios in their actual sport. So when they get to training, they have like this higher floor, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. So you can do that many different ways. You can do that by either making the playing field small or adding more players to the playing field.
Yeah.
Um, you can take away what they do best and make them actually force. So if someone's like basketball, we'll just stick with basketball. Someone's like a dribble and drive, like
Mm-hmm.
you can't do that. You can only pass and you can
Right.
only score off ball. So things like that would force decisions and force them to expand their knowledge and creativity.
Yeah, for sure. And if you were to layer that into like a program though, right? Because I think
Mm-hmm.
there's always some type of screening process, right? In terms of like, that's what makes us who we are. We need to know like when an athlete comes in, like what are they good at? What are they bad at? Since
Exactly.
that process is very cognitive, what's like your screening for an athlete who comes to work with you? So like, let's say I have my kid. I'm like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
Jeremiah, my kid's coming in to train with you. It's
Yep.
like, what's the assessment look like? How do you put these together? And then I know it's a loaded question, but let's just say, how would you structure that program based upon what you initially saw with them?
So first things I would do, I would ask for film from the athlete, then ask you when you watch them play, what do you see, and see if those descriptions match.
Okay.
Um, and then from there, we do a lot of isometrics. So I'll put you in a lunge. I can see your compensations from the lunge. Um,
So
we'll
what's an
go into
example? Like, what's an example? Like you just,
just yeah. So just hold the lunge, perfect position, 90-90.
okay.
I'll set a running clock for 90 minutes and I'll see which way the body leans.
Okay.
And then I'll have you do saccades and see which eye glitches or which eye like bobbles, go in which direction. We'll go from there. Flying sprint, we'll do a flying 10. There's no pressure because you've probably never done it before.
Right.
So just have fun, run as fast as you can. Don't worry about form. Don't worry about technique, which way your head tilts. If your
So
tongue
why
comes
would you
out,
worry about that? Why would you worry about which way the head tilts?
what head tilts will tell me they're like visual or eye dominance.
Interesting. And
Yeah,
then those are things like you said, though, that you can improve upon, right? Within a training program.
exactly. Yes.
Cool.
Within the training program, we can fix upon that.
Would you
And
film? Sorry, I'm just asking, and for people who are
yeah, go
listening,
ahead.
would you film? So if someone's doing a flying sprint, would you film it, or would you just you're just looking at it and be like,
No,
oh,
I'd
wow.
film it.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Film it, slow motion. We'll go from the front, side, back, uh, just to see everything. And then show the kid, like, look, this is what's going on. Do you know why you do this? And they'll be like, nah, I didn't even know I did that. Like, I had a girl who would just like run like this for the. I was like, do you know you do that? And she's like, no, everything seems still.
The
Or
reason
my,
I'm
or
laughing, the reason I'm laughing is just twofold. One, I mean, take this joke as it is, but that's because, all right, this is a tangent on this podcast. Okay.
yeah, for
I know
sure.
you're in a relationship. I'm in a relationship, men, women, the whole nine. Women's brains. This is my brother's theory, and this is live on the pod. Women's brains, they say, is the box theory, right? So like there's boxes in your brain. In a
Yeah,
man's brain, only one or two boxes can be opened at one time, right? So
right.
like if we're on this podcast, I'm in this podcast. A woman's brain has a million boxes open at one time. And this is how I know, because you've been here, right? I'll be like to a woman, I'll be like, or female, girl, whatever, right? Whatever. Some guys can too. But it's like, all right, hey, you're going to do 3 sets of 8 at this weight, so forth and so on. And then they'll be like,
Mm.
okay, no problem. Do you want me to pinch my shoulders back? And then, do you like banana ice cream? Because when I was with my friend, and you're just like, whoa, you know what I mean? You're like,
Focus on.
right here. And it's so funny because every female, not every, that's general, but like
Yeah.
a majority of females that we see sprint, they literally do that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So and I don't know if there's causation's correlation, but it's so funny that you say that. I'm sorry, but that was just
No, no,
a
no.
little
Yeah.
tangent.
So yeah. But the answer is yes. Pinch your shoulders and banana ice cream is good. Yes to
Yeah,
both.
exactly. That's the thing. That's the goal. So, okay, cool. So you walk them through that assessment, and then you show them. And then
Mhm.
starting in earlier phases of a program, let's say if you're working with somebody, like what's your time frame usually that you work with people? Is it ongoing? Obviously, athletes are seasonal. So how do you construct
Mhm.
a program based upon that length of time?
I've been fortunate to have pretty much everyone ongoing.
Okay.
So I think, yeah. So this group I'm with, the majority have been with me for 5 years, and I've seen this particular group of kids of like 12 kids every day since they were like 12.
That's crazy.
So,
Wow.
and they're 16 now.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate to have this group um, ongoing basis, never really a lull. But usually what it is, we take high school season and we take club season.
Okay.
Since it's basketball and soccer sports and volleyball, club season tends to be more important.
Yeah.
So we kind of gear everything towards being really great in club. High school, most of them are already just like so dominant that it really doesn't matter. But
Yeah,
we just want to keep them healthy,
for
right?
sure.
Healthy, strong, get rid of some injuries or prevent injuries the best we can. Make sure they can handle the load of high school season going into club season,
Hmm.
right? And then they get that 2 week off, then it's back to high school season.
Yeah.
So I would say a high school kind of takes a back seat as far as that's when we'll do most of the preparation for club.
Okay.
Yep.
So in terms of like, let's say a particular training session, so you're just managing,
Mhm.
and that's one thing too that like a lot of people don't talk about. You know, it's almost like you have to understand the bigger picture of these athletes. Now you talk about basketball and soccer, they're playing 100 games a year, more than professional
Year round.
athletes. So
Hmm.
that fatigue level always exists. There's no such thing as like periodization. So
Right.
with that being said, in a particular training session, how do you organize your training session in regards to like, okay, this was the assessment. I saw what was going on. Now I have an hour roughly. What am I
Yeah.
working on sequentially within that hour?
So that's when the test becomes the therapy. So if I see something this in, like, we'll just use the lunge or anything, for example, I'm going to put you in a position that you hate, that you
Okay.
can't get into, and teach you how to breathe in that position. So you and I both know that the body just works off of survival,
For sure.
right? So we got to teach you to survive in a position that you can't into, and that's really hard. So
Yeah.
you're going to go, if you're in a lunge and you're tilting to the left, I'm going to tilt you to the right, and you don't want to be there because you're going to start shaking almost immediately. Your
Hmm.
legs are going to shake, breathing's going to be really hard. You have to learn to control that. And that's honestly the gist of everything we do. Once we find a position that you can't get into, we're going to put you in that position and we're going to force you to be in that position. So it could be a wall sit, it could be a glute ham, it could be a reverse hyper. If you're just ISOing on the single leg reverse hyper, it could be pretty much all that. And then we'll just, if it's a reverse hyper, you're just going reps.
So the reverse hyper is something that is, and that's a good point too, just in terms of addressing compensations essentially that you see, right? Based upon, and something that's not really talked about either is the why, right, behind something, not like the compensation that I'm seeing. Because if you don't
Right.
know that, and like you just mentioned, that's what's important. I said is all the fatigue and the stress of playing is just going to, enable primary, secondary, tertiary compensations that you're correcting.
Right.
But with the reverse hyper, there's a lot of like back and forth about it. Why do you think you find like, because I love the reverse hyper,
I love it too.
and a lot of people are like, oh no, you shouldn't do this, that, and the other. But like you said, the body's meant for survival. So why do you love the reverse hyper so much?
I like the angles we can hit with it. So we do a lot of hip flexion on it. So most people use it just like two legs
Right.
for the lower back and glutes. I like to hit the hip flexor. So you'll sit on it forward, leaning, and just swing the leg, have a little catch. So you get a total muscle contraction and
Yeah.
release that contraction, build a lot of momentum that way. And then you're
Especially,
getting just, go
no,
ahead.
go ahead. No, go. Sorry.
Oh, no. And you're just getting a lot of forces and you're teaching the body how to contract and absorb those forces for that short amount of time so you can keep rhythm.
Yeah, for sure. And especially in the psoas and the QL, that I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed. and just in terms of managing collision, just
Exactly.
from a lot of these people are just so weak in the sports that they play. It's just like overuse, and there's no true like structure and strength training around that musculature.
Mm-hmm.
And for females, because I saw you work with a lot of females, which I think is pretty
Yeah.
cool, and this is, feelings, no facts here, but females are better to train than males for sure. Just in
It's
the sense
definitely,
of, I don't know, I feel like they're at a younger age, I should say, they're more
yeah.
personality, they listen, they're fun, and it's just, and they want to be there. Once you have a good group of females, it's cool to
Mm-hmm.
see like they bring their friends and stuff like that. I don't know if you've noticed
Nope.
that, but
That's exactly the case. I had a mother, and she was like, "You trained a bunch of females," and she's a mother of boys. She's like, "We gotta get the boys." And I was like, I don't market. They
yeah,
just like, I'm bringing a friend. It's like, okay, bring a friend.
right.
And like, I don't do any marketing. I just like, cool, bring a friend. If you feel comfortable with a friend, that's awesome.
That's great.
And so, yeah, but definitely at a younger age, it's like this group since 12, so much easier to train than 12-year-old boys.
Oh, for sure.
And, and then as they grow, they just become easier. So,
For sure. And speaking of
yeah.
female training though, what are some differences, I've noticed a lot with females just in terms of the way you need to approach is different, not just from like coaching in terms of like intrinsic cues that you're giving, but almost just
Mm-hmm.
training structure, just in terms of from their anatomy, right? Just in terms of their nervous system, hormonally. Like, what are some things that you've noticed about females that you've had to really tailor or structure your programming around?
I wouldn't say much up until puberty starts to hit.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest differential. I know their body responds to more reps.
Mm-hmm.
So like high volume,
Yeah.
but that's about it. Other than that, like most of them have been kind of similar. Like we've been together for a while, so they know my like tones and they know my diction and my like disposition.
Yeah, of course.
So other than just like they respond better to higher reps, I wouldn't say too much has changed or there's too much difference.
Yeah. But that's a good
Yeah.
point though about like the higher reps, just in sense of, for males, let's say you're doing your strength training stuff, I've noticed that females, whether it's like a body weight or even like a external loaded exercise, it's like they need to take smaller jumps because that like, I don't know, that neurological, I want to almost call it like your factor, where
Right.
men can like psychologically prepare for heavier attempts, in terms of like
Mm-hmm.
20, 30 pounds. But like a female, you could go from being like using an aluminum bar, you're benching the bar, you put 2.5s on, they get buried. Whereas like the guy could go like a regular bar, 95s, 135, because that neurological output and muscular output can match what that external load is. Where I've noticed with females, it's like those jump attempts have to be very small as as you progress in weight.
Yeah. So I think for us, they've been embedded in ISOs for like the last 4 years. So I think once they mastered that, I mean, there is like some fear
Of
at
course.
first when it's like, oh no, 300-pound deadlift. I don't know if I could do that. And I was like, we just did 295. Like, you'll be
Yeah,
fine. And it's
for
like,
sure.
oh, I guess. And then and it's up. So a little more coaxing maybe, but uh, overall, for the most part, they're like on par, if not just above, like the intensity when it comes to training
Yeah, for sure.
with the compared to the boys.
Yeah. I want to circle back a little bit because we were talking about, this was the healthy athletes. But when it comes to maybe like an injured athlete, walk me through your thought process for rehabilitating maybe an injured athlete and some of the cool things that you've been doing.
Sure. So we'll just use the ACL kids as the example for this one. This started about 3 years ago. There was a goalkeeper. She got hurt right before the championship game or semifinal game, one of the games. She got hurt practice before, tackled from behind, ACL was gone. My biggest thing then was just to keep her reflexes sharp. So obviously she's in a boot, she's in a brace, she can't walk, can't run, can't do anything. So I was like, okay, we'll just keep your hands fast. So goalkeepers pride themselves on being able to observe and perceive visual kinematics from like the kicking form and all that stuff. They can tell where the ball's going based on the angles. So I was like, all right, we just got to keep that strong, keep that going. So we just, if she's standing and just like bouncing balls, off a spike ball,
Mm-hmm.
spice ball net, and just having her catch with her hands. And then once she was able, I let the PT handle her ACL then, because I wasn't versed in the knowledge that I am now. And then when she was able to run, we started adding change of direction almost immediately. So like reacting to a ball that was bounced off a trampoline or bounced off a box, and have her cut and get down. And then now, as I'm a little more confident with ACL rehab, I'm all about making load first things first. So with the kids that we're doing now, and she was able to get back in 7.5 months.
Wow.
And she had ACL, MCL, and meniscus. She had like 3. And surgeon was like, I guess you're ready to go.
Yeah.
So she was able to come back in 7.5 months.
Okay.
Not that like we were striving for that. It just happened to be that way, and it worked out that way. And now she's committed to Illinois. So fast forward to the kids I have now, 2 basketball athletes, 1 soccer athlete. My biggest thing for them after surgery, so let's say they had surgery on Thursday, 48 hours, I need to see them. So that Saturday,
okay,
I had to see them that morning. My whole goal, the only time frame that I have to meet, is get them to full extension and 90 degrees by 7 days post-surgery. And we used...
Which is sometimes, I was just going to say, which is sometimes controversial.
Yeah, hell, yes. So
like people are like, that thing needs to be straight for 5-6 weeks right after you don't load the tendon, blah, blah, blah. But why do you think otherwise?
So I went off a surgeon. He was like, surgeon of one of the girls said, you can move in it right when you get home. Just start bending it. Try the best you can. If it hurts, stop there.
Yeah.
So that was literally a day after her surgery. She was told to move it. And they gave me the protocols, and I was like, all right, we're going to follow this guy's protocols. Kind of like it. But like, I was also doing research, and I was like, like full extension, 90 degrees within 7 days. I was like, okay. And so the first thing we shot for was full extension, right? Get the back of the knee to hit the pad, the table. And we used a lot of Russian stem. So we used our stem machine to make sure the contraction can happen. First, what we did was we sat them straight against the wall.
I'm just asking questions because, it's funny. I'm dealing with 2 of them right now with professional athletes. So, one's just personally and just terms of, are the things we're doing right based on your experience, but 2, also for the listeners to be like, okay, what can I actually take from it? What stim equipment do you use? Because I think that's really important in the process. So.
Yeah. I used a Richmar Quattro 2.5.
Okay.
It has NEMS, it has TENS, it has Russian, it has IF, but I only use Russian. Like I don't even use it. I lie. I use TENS as well. So Russian and TENS is what I use the most. So first things first was to get them to contract their quad by themselves. So we would sit them 90 degrees if they're just sitting flat on the table, anterior pelvic tilt, and just get them to squeeze their quad. And obviously you can't, right?
Of course.
So it's okay. All right, squeeze the good leg or the uninvolved leg just 100 times as fast as you can. Look at the involved leg, see if you can match it. And then so we would honestly sit there 2 days after surgery for like an hour trying to get this quad to contract. And it turned into, once they get it, and then it's all right, contract, hold for 2 seconds. Contract, hold for 5 seconds. Contract, hold for 10 seconds. Okay, cool. Now do that 300 times.
And why, and just so everybody knows, right, because this is something that we did, but like why is the contraction around the muscle, or I should say the joint, so important? Right, for that in that early of rehabilitation. Yeah,
so surgery's trauma, that. I know that. Of course, when the ACL happens, when the rupture happens, the quad and the hamstring just like shut down. Well, the brain shuts it down.
Yeah.
To protect the joint, and then survival at its finest, right?
And
to
then that
protect the
goes back
joint.
to the stiffness, that why people say you don't want to go against that, but in reality you're trying to help, sorry, go
Exactly.
ahead though, but yeah.
No, go ahead. No, you're perfectly right. And that's exactly that. And so now we have to, and especially like prehab was so important.
Yeah.
So after the event happened, we kind of like the same thing right after surgery, did the same until they can walk and then train like normal. But anyway, after surgery, we're trying to like trick the brain into thinking that the joint's safe, because it's been repaired. It just doesn't have its mechanoreceptors in there, so it doesn't know that it's stable. So we're tricking the brain to release the tension of the hamstring and the quad. So get the quad to contract to lengthen the hamstring. If you can lengthen the hamstring, you get the full extension, and vice versa. And then if you can contract the hamstring, you can lengthen the quad, and you can get to 90 degrees.
Right.
So once you get them to contract the quad under their own volition, under their own control, and that's when we started adding the stem to it. And that'd probably be like day 2. Honestly, we were that same day. It was so long ago, I don't really remember, but it was that day. And they would just like squeeze, and they're literally just there, tracking 500 times, 20 minutes, take a break, heel slides, go to the point of what stops you, not necessarily pain, but what you can do. And then you have 500 reps of that.
Yeah. And now once we've done that, so that's initially in earlier stages. So more so it's just neural connection, get that musculature to move so you can place load on it at 90 degrees of flexion, essentially.
Exactly.
Now you start to load it a little bit. So what does that load begin to look like? So, well, now you've gotten past that phase, which is super important, because I think too that what I've seen is if you can't get through there and the therapist isn't doing a good job, and you as the integrator isn't doing a good job, you're literally postponing that time. And like you're literally starting 8 weeks out when you could have been starting like 2 weeks out.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So let's say now that you can load it, right? What's the game plan now? So now that they can handle load, so what are some things that you do from there?
Load. Then it just becomes back to like you're a new athlete to me. Then it just goes back to isometrics.
Okay.
So now it's like a 2.0, almost a rebirth, because now we can actually like shore up everything by breathing, trying to get rid of those compensations, which, hard to do, but like that's the goal. Right. So loading will look like a lunge, a wall sit, contracting the hamstrings in the wall sit.
Yeah.
You got your, and then you have your lunge, same thing, breathing, contracting the front hamstring, contracting the back quad. And you're just trying to just add stress and load to it. And then you have your like heel elevated squats. And for us, I've kind of like, this is going to be controversial too. I got rid of timetables. Like by 6 weeks, you should be here. By 10 weeks, you should be there. We don't do this till 12 weeks. I was like, if you could do it, we're going to do it with safety.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, because it's not like you're going to impose. Yeah, you're not going to put them in a dangerous position, but you're just seeing like what's the body capable of. And back to cognitively, I think it builds confidence in the individual, because they're like, oh wow, I actually can do this. Not like, hey man, you're not ready yet. You're not at your 6 months yet. It's like, no, like you're ready to rock and roll.
You don't want to know SIBO your own people.
Right. So. Exactly. So I was just going to say, yeah, go ahead. Keep going. No,
so it's just like isometrics, and then isometrics with load. And then you get into the dynamic squat of like just dynamic movement, single leg squat, split squats, leg extension, obviously, like that's key. Knee extension with stem, and we've done, and even that's light, and that's still going to be over 100 reps.
For sure. And then, so once you get going a little bit more, right, something that I think that you mentioned that's really unique and really cool is just the use of the visual and the vestibular system.
Right.
And so does that start super early on as well? Is that kind of just like in conjunction with everything that's going on? If so, how do you layer it in?
That's a really good question. I try to do that ASAP as well. Okay. So even if they're still in their like brace and they can finally stand, like my basketball players are dribbling and they're doing their like Stroop tests. So for those who don't know, a Stroop test is it's just like a flashcard, and it says the word red, but the word is written in blue. So you would say blue. And then I would match up cones. I would set up boxes so they can just reach corresponding color cones, and they're just dribbling, boom, on their side, hold up the card. and it's like red. So they touch red. And if the color's blue, they touch blue, back and forth. Um, that helps with the cognitive load. It helps with inhibition of the anterior cingulate cortex, which is like the area of the brain that perceives fatigue. So we're just like dialing in that muscle because they can't play.
Right.
They can't really do anything. They can't comprehend. So like if we just focus on that area of the brain, it's hard. And
Yeah.
And unknowingly, I didn't know this until maybe like a couple months ago, but there's a brain lesion that happens when you get hurt. So you have the ACL injury, you have your premotor cortex, and you have your primary motor cortex. And a brain lesion happens when you have a ligamentous injury. So now the involved limb now is receiving an impulse from a different part of the brain compared to the uninvolved limb. And so that could be a theory why we're having, like, no matter, like, oh, I'm 18 months out and kids still getting hurt.
Yeah. And so you're saying it's almost like a cognitive compensation.
It's cognitive compensation. And then that's the part of rehab that we don't really touch upon.
Yeah.
The cognitive compensation part. And then that's why you see us now, we're using a lot of like synaptic goggles, lasers to bring back that vestibular and proprioception.
I think too, PTs though usually don't even include that stuff into their rehabilitation. Obviously, they're doing manual work, they're doing stim, they're doing load at flexion, but it's like there's that whole other component of sport that,
Right.
like, you know, I think as our jobs is like that we are the integrators to bridge the gap between, you know, rehab, prehab to like application, if you will.
Exactly, because sports distracting. Like, how many times, like, when you look at athletes, you just like whoever your favorite basketball player is right now, I really enjoy watching like Ja, and I'm just like, how is he doing these things?
Right.
Like we take these things for granted because it's so many decisions happening at once. And if you actually break down, like especially basketball, it's like you're dribbling, you're reading picks, you're reading double teams, you're trying to make decisions on the fly. And you and I both know that decisions happen within 200 milliseconds.
Yep.
How many decisions are you making within 1 second or 2 seconds or 5 minutes? Right.
For sure.
So that fatigue and then that like physical demand that's not met in traditional PT, and then kids come back like 12 months later and they re-injure their ACL, we wonder why.
Yeah. And one of the things that we've been doing too, and I'm sure you can attest to this, and I'm sure you've used it, is almost like positional conditioning, or like stimulating positional conditioning, in the sense of like being able to do a task for like 10 minutes, you know, during a rehab process, or even in like the off season. So for an example is like, I might be having an athlete do extensive upper body plyos or lower body plyos while doing something like a Stroop test, where it's like you're reading, hey, for 10 minutes, you're going to do 30 here. So you got to count, tell me the colors, you're going to take a 20-second break, but you got to be focused on like those multiple tasks for like 10 minutes at a time. You know,
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like, that's dual tasking. It's fine. It's like, gorgeous.
Because I think what I've seen is fatigue wise, the body is never really fatigued if you're playing in that many games and what have you. But once we're saying is like, once you get like cognitive fatigue because of what you just mentioned too with, you know, the adhesion, it's like, that is, you need to marry the two, because the body will be fatigued, or the brain kind of fatigues way before the body post injury, is what I'm kind of saying though. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah.
So I think,
because that's, again, that just goes back to survival, but yes.
So I think that's really important. So I think like the main thing here though is there's three key pillars that you're talking about. One, you know, create an environment where they feel comfortable and they can be able to reestablish tasks at hand, musculature, your stim work. Number two is, as soon as they're able to get to weight-bearing exercises at 90-degree hip flexion, then you can start to begin to load them slowly based on tolerance. And then three is, like we're saying, is just cognitive stimulation consistently throughout that whole rehab process. I think is really the key, you know, and that's the best way we can be integrators. You know, do you have any final thoughts on that a little bit? Because I know this is going to be a big topic, just in terms of, there's a lot of people that have been asking me questions because of how many injuries are being sustained, you know, over the last year.
Yeah, definitely. But that's perfect because you summed it up perfectly with the dual tasking, because we do the same thing. We'll have single leg tuck jumps. And then this is a good thing because you can also like pair it up with eye dominance. You can take your dominant eye out. And the way you do that for the listeners, the way you figure out their dominant eye is you just take an object, like we use, just like on the side of the wall. You center that object, and like I have your face centered in my triangle, and then I just shut an eye, and whatever eye I still see the object, that's my dominant eye. So the opposite eye needs to be trained.
Okay, so I have something on the wall here.
Yeah.
I zone in on like what I see.
Yeah.
But what do you mean? You just keep going there.
Yeah, you just hold it like it probably has to be like 10 feet away or something. But
okay,
just center it, and then you'll close one eye, and then you'll close the other eye. And when other eye still sees the object, that's your dominant eye. That's a Dan Fichter gem.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then so what you would do though, so then real quick, and then we'll move on, is like to help counteract that dominant eye and build up your, visual system. What would you do? Like just things pertaining to, you're talking about like an eye patch.
I put an eye patch.
Oh, that's pretty
cool. They look like kids look weird. Like, oh man, I gotta wear this eye
for
patch.
Sure.
Bro, like, why do we why do we always do the weirdest things? And then they'll like have her run a flying 10 with this eye patch on. Go ahead, look like a pirate. Look, it's fine, it's cool. and then they'll do it, and then they'll take it off, and then it's like their time dropped almost like 2/10, and you're like, what just happened? I was like, it's just neurology.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool, actually. All right, so moving on a little bit, just in terms of the business aspect of what this is in the private sector. I think a lot of coaches sometimes believe that sure, you have to become a world-class expert in what you do, but as you know this, we talked off air, is as you get going down the rabbit hole a little bit, and obviously we're a mature business and where we are, but you almost have to kind of make sure that what that is, of you becoming a world-class expert, doesn't blind you from like what's right in front of you and actually running a business, in terms of like ensuring you're delivering great experience, the whole nine. So for you, what are some of the hardest things, as running a business as a private sector coach?
The hardest thing right now, I would have to say, is managing schedules. With finding a spot was hard, definitely because of COVID, finding a facility. I'm literally building this business like day by day as we go. So understanding like just like the marketing side, like, do I market here? Is it too early for me to market? Should I have an ad campaign? Should I do all these things?
Right.
So that's been the hardest thing, just inner dialogue with myself. I say the way I've found myself out of this like inner conflict was just like doubling down on who I am. So just like, really, okay, this is what I do. Just do it really well.
Right.
I'm results based, and that's pretty much all I care about. I care about like the athletes playing well in games. I don't necessarily care about them hitting PRs every day. Like I do and I don't. I really want them to play well when it matters. It's like how as backwards is that for them to like do really well in the gym, and then come game time they're like not playing at all. Like, yeah. So
no, it's a good point though, just in terms of, one of the things that you're alluding to is also just experience, right? And providing a great service. Because I think, like you said, the things that you do from a training standpoint are outside the box, but I love it. But it doesn't supersede your ability to deliver great experience and clear communication, because athletes who come in the gym, they don't necessarily care about the science and the things that you have to deliver. So what are some things that you do? You said that the individuals you've been working with have been with you for 5 years. That's like, in the business realm, that's like extreme retention. So what are some cool things that you've done to help provide that awesome experience that have made kids want to come back and working with you and bringing their friends and what have you?
Yeah, we keep it loose. Like the work is hard, but the personalities are loose. I'm not a authoritarian person. I'm not a militant person at all. You can probably tell. We crack jokes. They roast me. I roast them. When it's time to get serious, we get serious. And I think that just comes with time. I'm very authentic. I don't like almost borderline, almost unprofessional, but like I'm a very authentic person, and I'll say what I feel today, good or bad. But that's the honesty I think they need. And I need it too. So I'll ask for feedback. Like, what am I missing? Like, am I not seeing? And if you can create that two-way street conversation with a teenager who probably doesn't, I mean, let's be honest, we were teenagers, we didn't have that
Yeah, of
with
course.
our parents, with our teachers, with our coaches. So if you can be that outlet for them, it's like, don't bullshit me, I won't bullshit you. What am I not seeing? And we'll just keep it 100 between you and me. I think that pays a lot of dividends.
Yeah,
in the
because
long run.
for sure, and they don't usually get that because their parents could be the authoritative figure where they're just telling them what to do. Then their coaches are also the authoritative figure telling them what to do, and then they have to come to you and they already have this like preconceived notion like, and he's probably also going to tell me what to do.
Yep.
So establishing that relationship is key. But like you said, once you have that, then you can be pretty serious. Like, hey, man, like, I need to pull you aside because you're not doing the things you need to do, but they're going to respect you for it,
Right.
especially right now. So I think that's an interesting point. It's a good point. And just in terms of building relationships, and not enough people put emphasis on that. They think that like, just because they're super smart, that they're just going to be this world-class, trainer. And that's just not the case.
Even I run into that problem sometimes, though. Like, even I'll just be like, and it's like, no, that's not the way to go about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Cool. So this is a rapid sports Q&A. I love doing this. It's just fun. So a couple questions here, and then we'll wrap up. Right. Number one, most athletic athlete you've ever trained?
There's two.
Okay.
There's two. One's actually recovering from an ACL injury. Another is the first ACL injury. She can do anything, like run, jump, 3 different sports. She got all league, first team in her second sport, all league, second team in her main sport. Committed to Illinois. The boy is extremely fast. I think his flying 10 is somewhere around a 0.94. You probably would have gone down to a 0.9 had he not got hurt. Vert was like 40 before he got hurt. He could run, he could play football. I always judge my athletes like, how many sports can you play? And if you can play more than 3, you're pretty athletic.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Smartest person you ever worked with or learned from, let's say, could be maybe, a friend, a mentor, even just like a book maybe that you just took a lot from.
Oh my God, so many. There's 2 guys that stand out. There's Brett Adams and Jared Burton, who I talk to on a weekly basis. They've definitely influenced a lot. Book, probably The Playmaker's Advantage, because that was kind of like the gateway to this rabbit hole. Dan Fichter I like a lot. Yeah, just go with them.
So The Playmaker's Advantage is an interesting book. It's really cool. I've heard of it, but I didn't really I'm looking at it right now. I'm definitely going to recommend it for our staff for sure. All right. So speaking of books, what are you currently reading?
I'm reading there's like 10 different books. So, there's the New Fit Method I'm reading. That's just made by the people who make the Newbie, but I thought it was interesting, so I bought it just to understand like the electrical modalities to the body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading that. I'm rereading Super Trading right now, just
for shits and gigs.
Just for shits and gigs. I'm just like, oh, there it is on my nightstand. Let me just read a paragraph before I go to bed.
Yeah.
There's something about this book, Trauma. I forgot the name of it, but it's how the body releases trauma. It's like Tiger in the Trauma, something like that.
Yeah.
Actually, let me see.
Yeah, there's a lot of good books there. You could Google if you want to, just in terms of
but let me check.
Yeah, it's like I know what you're talking about. It's how the body processes trauma or something like that. It's also in the line of like why zebras don't get ulcers.
Yeah, Waking the Tiger, Healing Trauma. That's what it's called.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, last one. Kind of loaded, but I always like to hear other people's opinions. You're right. Where do you see the industry going in 5 to 10 years?
Oh man, probably down this route.
Okay.
The route we're discussing about of neurodynamics and cognitive abilities. I think we're going to probably head down this route because now that research is actually researching it, you're going to see a lot of it. Because the stuff that I didn't know, like just to circle back about the the ACL and the brain lesions, that's all from Dustin Grooms from Ohio University. Just want to make sure he gets his due. But he put together a great seminar on integrating motor learning into ACL rehab, stuff we were doing, talking about. He actually put the scientific data together to show that like this is what the missing link is, and we need to address it. So I think that is an augmented learning, and there's going to be a lot of VR stuff.
Yeah.
For sports performance.
I think that's an interesting point too, just a VR, because you talk about like literally creating virtual environments where they have to like do multiple tasks and stuff like that. It'd be pretty cool. I don't know how, I mean, that could get pretty crazy, but at the same time, you know, I think it definitely is going to be in the scope of practice for sure.
Definitely.
Cool. All right, brother. Where can people find you or connect with you if they have questions about some of the things, or maybe, you know, they just want to explore a little bit more?
Sure. So I have 2 Instagram profiles. There's Flood Sports, Flood_sports, and then there's Coach_J Flood. You can reach out, pretty much an open book. All you gotta do is just ask. You can email me at jeremiah@floodsports.com. That's it.
Cool. Awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on and just sharing some of these cool things that we talked about today. Obviously, you know, we'll post all this stuff in the show notes so people can connect with you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.